Well, good morning, everyone. So glad that you guys are back with us. Before we jump into the message today, I do want to say something very quickly about Harrison County and to all the people who are out in Harrison County. I was out for a couple of weeks, and while I was out, we had a baptism service. And when I got back into town, they told me that we didn't just have a bunch of baptisms here, but they told me that we also had 7 baptisms out in Harrison County. And so I just want to celebrate that as a church family. And I just want to say to everybody who's out in Harrison County and to everybody here in Ocean Springs, that is why we have a campus out in Harrison County. We exist so that more and more people on the coast might come to know Jesus, and we're doing that work out there so that we can help people take their next steps in a relationship with Jesus. And so to everybody who's out in Harrison County, I just want to say this: keep up the good work and do not lose sight of how God is using you. It is both the greatest privilege and it is also the greatest purpose of your life. Today we are continuing a series that is called Truthbombs. As James comes to the end of his New Testament letter, he is just peppering Christians with one truth after another random truth. In fact, all the way back in week 1 of this series, James spent a lot of time sharing a truth that we need to consider about our financial plans. James expects Christians to have a financial plan that matches up with God's plans, because when that doesn't happen, it's not good for our lives, it's not good for the health of our churches, and it's certainly not good for the world that we are trying to reach. So he shared some truth about financial planning that we need to consider. Then in week 2, he shared some truths about the second coming of Jesus Christ to the earth that every person on the planet needs to consider. Now, as you kind of think back over these truths and the truths that we're going to get into today, these are truths that resonate with us because you can hear the wisdom in the counsel that James is providing. You hear it and immediately you think in your mind, well, that makes a lot of sense. But beyond it making sense in your mind, these are the kinds of truths that also resonate with your soul and your spirit. In fact, let me ask you, have you ever heard something and as soon as you heard it, it gave you chills or it gave you goosebumps? Has anybody ever had that experience? Okay, most of us have had that experience at some point in our lives. But did you know that there are people in other parts of the world, parts of Australia, where they don't call those goosebumps? They have a completely different name for them. They call them truth bumps. That they believe that when you hear a truth like that it so resonates with you that it starts to cause these little bumps to pop up on your arm or the back of your neck. It's the kind of truth that doesn't just make sense in your mind. Your body has a physical reaction because it resonates with your soul. Now, you've felt that. But how many of you have ever really thought about what's happening and why it's happening? Probably not many of us. Well, we've probably never really thought about it, but what's really happening is your mind is telling your body that is a truth that so resonates with you that you need to give it some thought. You need to give it some consideration, because deep down inside, what you know and what I know is that you can only live so long with your life out of alignment with the truth. I mean, you can deny the truth for a little while, but you cannot deny truth forever. I mean, you can deny truth about how much money you make and how much money you spend, but eventually reality is going to show up and those credit card bills are going to come due, right? You can deny truth for a little while about what you should be eating and how you should be exercising, but you can't deny that truth forever, because eventually reality is going to show up. Reality is going to push back and you're going to have some kind of health problem. The same is true in your relationship with Jesus. There are truths about Jesus. There are truths about yourself. There are truths about God and truths about eternity that you may be able to deny for a little while, but you cannot deny it forever. Because eventually reality is going to show up and you are going to see those truths for yourself. If something is true, it coincides with reality. And so you may be able to deny truth for a little while, but you cannot deny it forever, because eventually reality will set in and it will show up either during life on this earth or it will show up on the other side of eternity. Today, James is going to share another truth with us, and I'll tell you, it's a truth that you may be able to ignore for a little while, but this is one of those truths that you cannot ignore forever, because the truth that he's going to talk about today is a truth that affects your reputation. And the truth he's talking about today is a truth that affects every meaningful relationship you have. Here's the truth. You should say what you plan to do, and you should always do what you say. The truth that James is going to talk about today is this truth, that you should say what you plan to do, and you should always do what you say. There are a lot of people in America today who do not live their life by that truth. In fact, there are a lot of people in America today who will not say what they plan to do because they have commitment issues. And then there are a lot of people who do not do what they say, which means we don't just have commitment issues, we also have credibility issues. And so I want you to think about your own life for just a moment, because here's what I know. Based on your track record of either telling the truth or not telling the truth, based on your track record of either keeping your commitment or failing to keep your commitments, you have developed a reputation, and your reputation is affecting every meaningful relationship you have. In fact, here's how it typically plays out. When there is a gap between what people expect you to do and what you actually do, they fill that gap with one of two things. They either fill it with trust or suspicion. Okay, so when there's a gap between what people expect you to do, what your parents expect you to do, students, what your boss expects you to do, what your spouse expects you to do, when there's a gap between what is expected of you and what you actually do, everyone in your life is filling that gap with one of two things. It's either trust or suspicion. That means that your spouse, your kids, your friends, your teammates, your co-workers, your employer, they get to choose what goes in the gap. And they make that choice based on your past behavior. Based on your past behavior, they're either going to choose to believe the best about you, or they're going to choose to believe the worst about you. Why are they late? I don't know, but I guarantee you they got a good reason, because they're never late. Or, why are they late? I don't know, but they're always late, and I'm sure they'll have some lame excuse as to why they're late again today. And in a very real way, what's happening in that moment is someone is filling the gap with either trust or suspicion. With that in mind, I want to read to you the text today. It's only one verse where James is going to offer some simple, practical, very clear wisdom that has the potential to protect your reputation and improve your relationships. This is what he says in James chapter 5, verse 12. It says, "Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned." All throughout our study in the book of James, we have said over and over again that James has an expectation. And the expectation that he has is that your faith would make a real difference in your life. Now, when you come into chapter 5, verse 12, there's still an expectation, but the expectation gets a little more clear and it gets a little more specific. In this verse, it's pretty clear that James has an expectation that your faith would not just make a difference in your life, but that your faith would make a difference in your speech. Now, this is not the first time that James has suggested that our faith should make a difference in our speech. If you go all the way back into chapter 3, James spent a lot of time in that chapter talking about the importance of our tongue. He's basically telling us that we need to be the kinds of people who watch our mouth, because our mouth can get us into more trouble than maybe anything else in our lives. And so in James chapter 3, verse 2, James said this. He said, "We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect. They're able to keep their whole body in check." Now, James knows that no one on the planet is perfect. But he also knows that out of all the flaws in your life, your mouth can probably get you into more trouble than anything else. He then goes on in that same chapter to warn us about the dangers of slander and gossip. He talks in that chapter about prideful people who use their mouth to boast about what's going on in their lives and to brag about themselves. He goes on to talk about the dangers and the problems of people who are cursing. But now at the very end of the book, he's coming back to the issue of our speech one more time. It's like James is thinking at the conclusion of his letter about all of the things that Jesus taught, and it's like there's something that pops into his mind that Jesus said that now he has to say. What is it? There's no doubt that as James writes this one verse in chapter 5, verse 12, that he is thinking specifically about something that Jesus said during the Sermon on the Mount. You can go back and read it for yourself in Matthew chapter 5, 33 to 37. In this portion of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is talking to his followers about their credibility and how what they say affects the way other people think about them. I want you to hear me say this today. If you are a follower of Jesus, your credibility matters. It matters far more than you know or understand. If you're a follower of Jesus, you are a representative of Jesus in this world. And so when people think less of you, like it or not, they also think less of Jesus. With that in mind, I want to read to you what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. Sounds a whole lot like what James is saying now in chapter 5, verse 12. Jesus said it like this. "Again, you have heard that it was said of people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.' But I tell you, do not swear on oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need is to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." Now, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount was addressing what was apparently a pretty common problem in the religious circles of his day. There were a lot of people who were known to swear by some kind of oath. It's honestly no different than the world that we are living in today. In our day, you might hear people say something like, "I swear to God, I am telling you the truth." Now, when someone swears in that way, they are trying to emphasize or add credibility to their words. They sense that people might not normally believe them, but if they say it like this, then they just might believe them. In other words, people instinctively know that there's a gap, and they're trying to get people to fill that gap with trust. In fact, people do this all the time in our world, right? When someone is in a court of law and they're asked to testify in a case, they don't just hop up on the stand and grab the microphone and start sharing their version of the story. No. Before they ever speak, they are asked to place their hand on a Bible where they swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. In other situations, you might hear someone who says, I swear on my mother's grave, right? You ever hear somebody say that? Like that means you are serious, because the last thing you want is for your mama to come back from the grave to deal with you, right? Right? So we say things like that. You might listen in on children and their conversations with other people, and what do they say? Man, do you promise? Yeah, I promise. No. I need more than that from you. I need a pinky promise, right? Because you can't break a pinky promise. Like that's just next level commitment right there. When some of you were younger, you used to say it in what I believe is a very sick and sadistic way. You said, I cross my heart, I hope to die. Stick a needle. I mean, I just cringe just even hearing that. Yikes. Like if you don't keep that commitment, you got to stick a needle in your eye. When you say something like that, you are serious, right? The problem in Jesus' day is that people didn't want to swear to God because they thought it was immoral or anything wrong. But they didn't want to swear to God because they knew in the back of their mind they might not keep their commitment. That's what Jesus is getting at. And so what was the common practice of their day is instead of swearing to God, let's just bring it down a notch and let's swear by heaven. To which Jesus said, hey, that's where God lives. And so other people might bring it down another notch and go, well, then let's just swear by earth. To which Jesus said, man, that's God's footstool. So people would bring it down another notch and they would say, well, let's just swear by the city of Jerusalem. To which Jesus would say, that's the city where God reigns as king. So people would just bring it down another notch and they might swear by their own head. To which Jesus said, God made that head, you knucklehead, right? Like I don't care how far down you go. What Jesus wants people to know is that when you are speaking or when you are making a commitment, you may not want to include God, but there's nowhere you can go in this world to get away from God. And so what Jesus is really saying is there are no loopholes. Jesus expects his followers to make commitments and keep their commitments. Jesus expects his followers to keep their word, even when it's inconvenient to keep your word. You see, the real issue here is that people didn't want to swear by God because they knew that they might not keep their commitment. And so people in his day and people in our day, they got commitment issues, right? A lot of people in our world have commitment issues. We don't want to make a commitment because we're afraid that a better opportunity might come along, right? We don't want to make commitments because we don't know if we're going to feel like keeping the commitment when it's time to keep the commitment. And so let me just pause, take a time out, and let me just ask you, do you have commitment issues? Some of you are sitting next to your girlfriend of 5 years and she's poking you right now going, yes, you have commitment issues, right? Some of you just have a habit of canceling appointments and canceling meetings. Some of you are the kind of person who, when someone asks you to do something, you kind of say, I'll have to let you know because you're trying to buy yourself some time to see if a better opportunity comes along. For some of you, you don't want to serve in the church or join a group at the church because that feels like a commitment. Some of you don't want to set up recurring giving with the church because that feels like a commitment. Jesus and now James are both teaching that the Christian community needs to be different than the rest of the world. You need to simply say what you're going to do, but then you need to do whatever you say, right? You need to say what you're going to do. That's the commitment issues piece. But then you need to do whatever you say. That's the credibility issue piece. Both Jesus and James are saying in their letter that you need to simply say yes Or you need to simply say no, nothing else is needed. The expectation is that if you are a follower of Jesus, your word would mean something. That when you say you're going to do something, you do it. That when you say you're going to be there, you are there. When you say you're going to chip in on the cost, you chip in on the cost. And when you say no, you mean no. Let me tell you something. This credibility issue is a major problem in our country today. In fact, I would tell you that we have had a credibility problem for the greater part of 60 years or more now. You can go all the way back into the 1960s and 70s, and you start to see this problem really surface. Prior to that, you got the World War II generation. Those people said what they meant, and they meant what they said. But in the 60s and 70s, you started to see a credibility problem in the highest office of the land. In the 60s and 70s, there was a phrase that journalists created during the Lyndon B. Johnson era. At that time, Johnson and his team, they were making statements about what was happening in the Vietnam War. And journalists on the right and journalists on the left, journalists who were Republicans and journalists who were Democrats, they started to question whether or not those statements that were being made were really true. And so journalists of all backgrounds everywhere started talking about what became known as the credibility gap. They saw a gap between what was being said and what was actually happening. And because of this gap, the American people started to question whether or not they could trust their leadership. And so instead of filling the gap with trust, we started filling the gap with suspicion. If you can't trust your leaders, can you really trust anyone? And I would say that probably started to trickle down from the top, and it has made its way into every single person in this country. This isn't just a problem with government. This is a problem in our own lives and our own relationships. If you're a leader, you need to know that if people can't trust you, they will never follow you. If you are married or you one day want to be married, you need to know that if your spouse can't trust you, they cannot be married to you. If you're trying to build friendships, you need to know that if your friends can't trust you, then they cannot have relationship with you. In your business and at work, you need to know that if people can't trust you, they can't work with you, they can't do business with you, they can't do deals with you. Trust is the foundation upon which every meaningful relationship is built upon. Everyone knows that. The question is, what is the key to building or to maintaining trust? Well, according to a New York Times best-selling author, Simon Sinek, building trust requires nothing more than telling the truth. I don't even think that Simon Sinek is a Christian, and he gets it. It's that simple. And yet most people can't be trusted because most people aren't telling the truth. We make commitments, but we don't keep our commitments. Our words, they don't carry a lot of weight and a lot of credibility anymore. I mean, there was a day and there was a time in this country when a man would give you his word, it actually meant something. That if he would shake your hand, that meant that he would keep his promise. He wasn't afraid to make a commitment, and he would do everything in his power to keep that commitment. That is not the world that we are living in today. This is why, in part, I think we have so many lawyers in the country today, right? We can't trust people. And so we need a lawyer so that we can create some kind of legally binding contract in order to deal with people. In fact, did you know that in the last 50 years in this country, the number of lawyers in our country has increased by over 1 million, according to the American Bar Association? Now, I don't know about you, but that surprised me. What it communicated to me is that as our credibility declines, the need for lawyers is on the incline. Why? because we can't trust people to do what they say they are going to do. And I really do believe that this problem may start at the top of a government, but it also may start right in our own homes. And so parents, let me just ask you, in your parenting, do you do what you say you are going to do? When you say no, do you think your kids really believe that you mean no? Or do you find yourself saying, Johnny, I said no. Johnny, I mean it. Johnny, I'm going to count to 3. Johnny, I'm going to count to 10. Johnny, I'm going to go get your daddy. Right? What Johnny knows is that you say no, but you don't really mean no. In fact, what Johnny knows is that you may say no, but that if he just keeps it up long enough, he's going to wear you down and you are going to give in. Parents, don't do that. Don't send your kids mixed signals. When God says no, He means no. And when you say no, you should mean no. You say no in a calm way, and then you keep your commitment so that your child understands that yes means yes and no means no. And I can trust my parents that when they say something, they mean it. This doesn't just affect our parenting and the children that we are raising. This also affects our marriages. When a couple stands in front of a pastor, when they stand up there, dressed to the nines in front of all their friends and all of their family members, what do? They make vows. Now let me ask you, do they keep those vows? In fact, let me ask you like this. Are you keeping your wedding vows? You may have made those vows 5 weeks ago, 5 months ago, or 55 years ago, but I want to know, as of today, right now, are you keeping your wedding vows? Are you forsaking all others and saving yourself only for your spouse? Are you staying true to your spouse in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, till death do you part? I mean, just look at our world right now. People are waiting longer and longer and longer and longer to make a commitment like that. And then we can look at people who make those commitments, and it's pretty obvious that there are a lot of people in America who are not keeping those commitments. It's affecting the children we raise. It's affecting the family life. It's affecting marriage. And you better believe this is a truth that affects you in business. Let me just ask you, do the people that you work with, do they do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it? Or are they always making excuses? Are they always trying to extend deadlines because they're not keeping their commitments? Or think about it like this, by show of hands. How many of you have ever hired a plumber, a carpenter, a contractor, an electrician, a painter, a pool guy, or a yard guy, and they told you they were coming and they didn't come? They told you they would be there, but they weren't there. They told you they would call you back, and they never called you back. Let me see your hands. Yes, almost every single one of us have experienced that. And if you have not, I need your black book, because I want to start dealing with the people that you are dealing with, right? But we've all experienced something like that. Why? Because people don't keep their word. And most of those people, they don't even have good excuses for why they didn't keep their word. I mean, they just tell you, man, the fish were biting today and I couldn't come to help you out, right? I drank too much the night before and I couldn't get out of bed. I'm sorry about that. Listen to me. If you are just starting your career, I'm going to give you a little career advice, a little leadership advice. If you will just say what you're going to do and then just do whatever you say, you will probably have a very successful career. I hate to admit it, but that's how low the bar is in this country right now. It's hard to work with people because it's really, really hard right now to trust people. I'm not the only one who thinks this. Years ago, there were a couple of guys, Coots and Posner, who wrote an incredible leadership book. It's a classic in leadership literature. It was called The Leadership Challenge. I want you to listen to what they said. They said, it is clear that if people anywhere are willing to follow someone, whether it be into battle or into the boardroom, the front office or the front lines, they first want to assure themselves that the person is worthy of their trust. They want to know that the person is truthful, ethical, and principled. That nearly 90% of constituents want their leaders to be honest above all else is a message that all leaders must take to heart. Did you hear those words? Above all else. That's what people want to know about their leaders, is that I can trust them and I can take them at their word. It's more important than how successful you are. It's more important than how much money you pay. It's more important than how credible you are or how connected you are. Above all else, people want to know that they can trust you and that they can take you at your word. That right there is why James started chapter 5, verse 12 with those two words, above all. There are a lot of things in life that will affect your reputation. There are a lot of things in life that will affect your relationships with other people. But above all those other things is your credibility. People need to know that you are the kind of person who says what you mean and you mean what you say. Now, this is the kind of principle that applies to every single person in the room, whether you're a Christian or not. It applies to everyone in Harrison County, everyone watching online, whether you are a Christian or not. But if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, there is even more riding on this for you than for anyone else. See, the reason this is such a big deal is because James knows there's something that's at stake that's even more important than your credibility as an employee. There's something that's at stake that's even more important than your credibility as a parent or even a spouse. Do you know what it is? It's your credibility as a follower of Jesus. That if people in this world don't trust Christians, that if people in this world have little to no respect for Christians, they will never want to be a Christian and they will never even listen to a Christian. But if the Christian community distinguishes itself from everyone else in the world by simply making commitments and then keeping our commitments, then we earn credibility with the world that we're trying to reach. People learn really quickly that they can trust us in the little things, but they can also trust what we have to say about the most important things. That is why James is insisting that Christians always be true to their word. Let me tell you something about Jesus. Jesus was always true to his word. He made a lot of statements, a lot of promises, and a lot of commitments. And he kept every single one of them. And he expects his followers to do the same. He wants you to do what you say you're going to do, when you say you're going to do it. I want to end today with a story that Jesus told and a question that Jesus posed toward the end of his ministry. It's found in Matthew chapter 21, verses 28 to 31. Listen to what he says. He says, "What do you think? There was a man who had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work today in the vineyard.' 'I will not,' he answered. But later, because he didn't have anything better to do, he changed his mind and he went. Then the father went to the other son and said the same thing. He answered, 'I will, sir.' But he did not go. Which of the 2 did what his father wanted?" Now, do you know why Jesus told this story? The story or the parable of the 2 sons. If you were to continue reading down into verse 32, Jesus makes it very, very clear that during his time on the earth, he encountered 2 kinds of people: rebellious people and religious people. The problem with rebellious people is that they wouldn't make a commitment to God. The problem with religious people is that they made all kinds of commitments to God, but they wouldn't keep their commitments to God. First son said, "I will not. I'm not going to make a commitment to you." The second son said, "I will, sir," but he wouldn't keep his commitment to God. A lot of people in the world fall under those 2 categories: rebellious people who don't want to make any commitments, and religious people who struggle to keep their commitments. And so as we wrap it up today, I want to encourage you. I want to challenge you to both make a commitment to God and to keep your commitment to God. With just 7 weeks left in the calendar year, you can consider this a jump start on your New Year's resolution, okay? You get a jump start on everyone else. When you walked in, you had a commitment card on your chair. I want you to hold that card up for me for just a second, okay? We'll make sure everybody's got their commitment card, okay? Here's the deal. I want you to take that card home with you, and I don't ever want to see that card again. Do you hear me say that? I don't ever want to see the card again. The card is for you, and that card is between you and God, okay? But I want to challenge you to put pen to paper. I want you to write down your commitment to God, and then I want you to put it in a place where you can see it so that you can remember to keep your commitment to God. Now, listen to me. I'm not giving you a long list of commitments I think you need to make. That's what legalists do, okay? Here's a really long list of all the commitments you need to keep, and they become overwhelming and really hard to keep, and you feel like a total failure. But here's what I am asking you to do, and I'm trusting God to do. I'm trusting that God will lead you to the commitments that He wants you to make in 2024 for both your life as a follower of Jesus and your family and your business, whatever it is. And then I'm going to trust you to keep the commitments that you make. And here's what I believe is going to happen. That as you grow in your ability to keep a commitment to a God that you can't even see, you're going to get better and better at keeping your commitments to the people that you can see. And as you do that, I believe that not only will your reputation improve, but I believe that every relationship you have will improve as well. Let's pray together. Dear God, I thank you so much for your word. I thank you for the way that it has challenged us today. God, this is obviously an area where we all have a lot of growing to do. And so, God, I pray that you would make us more like Jesus. Help us to be like the one who made commitments and he kept his commitments. And I ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.